Well. All right, y'all, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We got several people online and some folks in the room as well. Can somebody online just let me know that y'all can hear?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, this is Jessica.
The problem in here is that you gotta have the air on because it gets hot, but it's loud when it's on. So we might sweat a little bit today. We'll see.
And if you see us walking back and forth over
Yeah.
here, that's what it is. We're trying to manage those two things. So first things first, we've got Forrest Dickman with us today to talk a little bit through the Empower Mississippi. Oh, or Ellen, you
I just wanted to say hello.
Well, first, let me introduce Ellen Collins, our executive director, to say a few words.
Yeah, I just wanted to pop in because I never really get the opportunity to sit in on the Affinity group meetings. And so wanted to say welcome and you all getting ready to participate in an important discussion. And I just also want to impart how important the Affinity group model is to the Alliance. And so we appreciate you taking your time coming today and sharing the information with us. And so I'll be sitting in over there and taking a little lunch break while I listen in. So welcome again. Thank you for participating. I'm looking forward to the outcome of the day.
Ellen's been traveling quite a lot lately, so there's still a lot to catch up on. We were in Nashville last week for a few days, and she was in DC before that,
And in
Delta
Birmingham.
yesterday, Birmingham, so she's been all over. Yeah.
Okay, so like I say, we've got Forrest Dickman here to tell us a little bit about the Empower Mississippi report that they put out on the Mississippi's like participation rate. And our goal today is really to talk through that report, talk through a report from the National Council of Nonprofits. And we have Jessica Mendieta here to tell us a little bit about that report that documents the workforce shortage in the nonprofit sector. And good morning or good afternoon. And once we've heard a little bit from them, we're going to have some open discussion about what we as professionals in the sector or in our various sectors can do to address the sector in the shortage in the nonprofit sector and ways to help promote a higher labor force participation rate. So our goal with the affinity groups is really to learn with one another and to get together afterwards to develop some working groups to move forward with either policy recommendations or action items that we can take away to push work related to the topics from today forward. Anything you want to add before you?
No, I mean, I think this is the first time for several people in here, many people in here, to come to one of our affinity group meetings, and we've changed the structure of it since we started back in originally the education affinity group in 2018, even before the Alliance launched as a new organization. And that group was started with the funders in Mississippi and some national funders that were funding education related work got together and said, how can we work better together? There's this pipeline of funding across the education system, and where are gaps in that pipeline that we can work more collaboratively on to fill those gaps by working together. So out of that model, we created two other affinity groups focused on health and health and workforce. And so we've been meeting for the last 2.5, 3 years within the model of those three groups kind of being separate from each other and realize that they're all connected. And so rather than keeping them siloed, how do we create strategy around very particular issues that touch all three of those different groups? Today's a great example of how that interconnectedness is going to be on display, because our workforce impacts our education system, impacts our workforce impacts our healthcare, and so they're all connected. And so we've changed our model a little bit over the last 2.5 years on how we approach our strategy with our affinity groups. We used to meet, each one of them would meet separately on a quarterly basis. And so we're not really doing that anymore. We're having like a one quarterly convening where we talk about all the issues together. And then, as Michael said, we develop these working groups around very particular specific issues that come out of our conversation. So if you were online, if you could go on mute, just getting a little bit of background noise, and we can't see anybody's faces, so if anybody wants to come on camera, you can, but if not, that's fine. If we can mute everybody. So somebody's,
It's either Melissa or Lucille.
Melissa or Miss Lucille, maybe. It's getting toasty in here already.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
I wore long sleeves today. That wasn't good.
Garage style doors where you can open up.
Uh-huh.
But then you get street noise, so you can't win for losing.
We're a little warm in the room, so bear with us here. Okay. Well, I'm gonna invite Forrest. He's gonna share with us first. If y'all haven't had a chance to see the report that was released back in August, they've been sharing that in multiple places, and I heard a little bit about it at the Capitol one day, and so he's going to go through that report with us, and would like to just acknowledge that Rebecca Staples was originally planned to be here, but learned that her mom did pass away, so just keep Rebecca in your thoughts, and if you don't know her, she's worked closely with Forrest, and so we'll just send her well wishes, I guess is the right word. So, all right, I'm gonna turn it over to you. And you want us to click, or do you want to click?
Oh, I'll click.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, it's clicking.
And can everybody online see the screen? See the presentation?
Yes.
Yes. Just not clicking?
That was that from here?
Yeah.
So I might.
Okay. Oh, we clicked a little too fast. There we go. Okay, I can do it. I'll do it. We'll take turns. How about that? If I get tired, are you sure? Well, they can't see you.
Oh, I didn't know they did.
Can y'all see Forrest? Okay, all right.
All right, well, so where's the camera? Is that the camera?
Yes,
Okay.
and it moves with the speaker. It's supposed to.
Okay. All right, I was concerned that was the camera, and they would see what somebody yesterday called this a solar panel. Somebody just involved, and I said, I'm catching up with you, and he said, no, you just got a solar panel. I'd never heard that before. So thank you, Jamie. I am filling in for Rebecca. I found out this yesterday, so bear with me as I go through this. Rebecca gave this report to the Senate Task Force on Labor Force Participation a few weeks ago, and so I hope I'll be an adequate fill-in for her. Empower Mississippi is an advocacy organization, but we're moving more into doing research, more in-depth research instead of just the gathering information. We're actually trying to delve more deeply into the issues we work on. We work in 3 issue buckets: education, criminal justice, and work. And we started as an organization 10 years ago. I got there 2.5 years ago, but the organization started 10 years ago. Primarily as an education organization promoting more opportunities for parents. Some people call it school choice. And then a couple of years after that, added criminal justice. And then a couple of years after that, added the category of work, which we had kind of that's everything from tax policy, occupational licensure, and what we'll be talking about today is just workforce availability, workforce incentives, that type of thing. Basically, it comes down to we are working to remove barriers that keep Mississippians from rising. And so that can be financial barriers, it can be criminal justice history barriers, it could be policy barriers, it could be cultural barriers. So we're really trying just now starting into looking more deeply into all that. So we heard from a foundation, it's a couple of years ago now, that it's going out of business. And they said, but for our last hurrah, we're going to invite proposals on anything that has to do with economics, economic policy in the state. And so we had already been talking about the fact that our state has what's now the lowest unemployment rate in our history, but yet we have the lowest labor force participation rate in the country. So how could those two exist? Part of it is it's just a mathematical calculation of the two different rates, but there's more to it than that. So the more we started looking into it, we thought we'd really like to not only find out what the facts are, but we'd like to analyze and come up with some recommendations. So we proposed that to this foundation, and they said, that sounds good to us to do. So no expectations of exactly what it would be, other than just a few things like a report that we told them we do. So we were thinking that we would just jump in, fill in the gaps of research that was already out there, and then, from all of that information, come up with some recommendations on, from our perspective, would help fix things. Came to find out there had been almost no research on this issue, except just a little bit of silo type of research that only affected kind of what seemed to be a predetermined outcome. So we noticed that this project was going to have to be a little broader, and so we decided we would start at the beginning and just try to identify elements within the labor force and the labor force participation rate that really have an impact on the state. What's beneath all that? And we decided we would not go into it with any preconceived notions, not any predetermination of what we wanted to recommend. So work backwards from that, find what we want to find. We just said, let's see what the deal is. What are we looking at in Mississippi? So we engaged NSPARC in Mississippi State to, it's, for those of you who aren't familiar with NSPARC, it's an acronym.
National Strategic
Planning
National
and Analysis Research.
Yeah.
I don't know why I couldn't just split that off. These are reports that if I hand them out, you'll start reading. They're available for you. We've got a few in here. But this is also online. While I'm thinking about it, in addition to this report online, we also have some supplemental things that we don't really talk about enough. One of those is the survey that the Census Bureau does for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Bureau of Labor Statistics is the one that comes up with the unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate. So in order to get to those numbers that they recommend, there's this long survey that, unfortunately, out of all the questions they ask, we only end up getting these 3 little data points that really might not tell you much. I'll get to that in a minute. But there are other things like that if you're wondering what kinds of questions you're asked. But part of the problem is that the data is so limited. For instance, I would have mentioned this now, that first of all, the way it's calculated. So whenever you hear the unemployment rate, what that means is that's how many people who are looking for a job, actively looking for a job within the last month, they've done something to try to get a job, and were unable to, as a percentage of that group and all the people who are employed. So it's just the people who the labor force is people who are working and people who are actively looking. And so the labor force participation rate is that total of people compared to all the people age 16 and older.
So the labor force, they have to be also looking for another job, like they're working, but they want to find another
They're
job?
either working or they're not working, but looking for a job. So if they're just looking for a job, then they are unemployed.
Unemployment, okay.
If they're not looking for a job or they've given up looking for a job, then they're not even counted in the labor force.
Okay,
So the unemployment rate is just a portion of the labor force that doesn't have a job. So in Mississippi, that's about 54% of people who are in the labor force. That means we've got 47% of people who are not even looking for a job. They're not working, they're not looking. Some of those are retired, so that makes sense. So our next round, we're going to limit it to all the prime working age. Yes, ma'am. By the way, yes, please ask questions.
That labor force, and that includes people that have like, that work from home or home-based businesses, things like that. Is that including that? Is that kind of a gap where we don't really have basic support?
About that. So did y'all hear that question? So the question is whether the labor force data includes people working from home. And the answer is if they happen to be called by the Bureau of Labor, or by the Census Bureau, and ask the question, then yes, they count it. So here's the deal. The employment, if you're employed, that just means that last week before they called you, that you worked at least 1 hour in a week. That's all it takes to be employed. And so that, limits it. People could be working 1 hour a week, or 3 hours a week, 10 hours a week, and they're still counted in the employment as employed. So, yes.
You do have a mechanism to capture that data, and people have home-based businesses or whatever it is that they may abuse them on, or, do you have a mechanism in place to find out who's actually active and working, or is that kind of outside of the box?
Okay, so the question is there a way to actually find that information? And that, I think, will be part of the discussion at the end, because the answer is there's a way to get closer to it, but not really. And so the Census Bureau does, I think it's 60,000 calls nationwide every month to determine the employment rate. So Mississippi probably gets about 700 or 800 calls. And they ask these questions that are on the survey. And that's how they come up with their data. So it's self-reported if you happen to get a call, which obviously if you're on a call, it's 600 people. I might not very many people are answering. So that's part of the limitation. The Department of Employment Security actually collects information on jobs. They don't have any demographic information like the Census Bureau can provide with those calls they're making. And that might get us closer. We just learned that last couple of weeks, so that will be part of our next phase. And you'll see that, or you would have seen that we're calling this an interim report because once we launched into it, we saw how much information is out there. We said, let's just give a report along the way on what we're finding instead of just having a huge report at the end. And we're not going to have any recommendations yet because we don't really have the full picture. We don't want to just do what we've said everybody else would do. We just kind of come up with some recommendations that sound good. So we're inviting people to ask questions. So I appreciate your questions on that. And so those are the data limitations that we have to work. But at least in terms of what's reported out there, this is, with the unemployment rate, labor force participation rate, these are the numbers that the policymakers are working. So that's kind of what we're trying to address and look more into the depths of what all that means. So with NSPAR, we decided we would take, and I'm just kind of ignoring this slide. We decided we would take a look at 4 areas to start at age, gender, race, and education family. So those are the areas that we looked at. And so as we found, what NSPARC was able to gather from various sources is that education is the most accurate predictor of whether a person is involved in the labor force. So we have been hearing a lot more, and I'm not discounting it, so don't hear it this way. But we have been hearing a lot more about people, public officials, saying, you don't have to have a 4-year degree to get a good paying job, and that's true. But looking at it in the big picture, the fact is, the more education you have, the more likely you are to be in the labor force. And actually, the highest percentage in the labor force is an associate's degree, but just behind that is a bachelor's degree. But if you don't have even a high school diploma, then I think that it's in the 20s, like 23% of people without a high school diploma are in the labor force. So whether that's because they're just choosing that or because they're not qualified, because they don't have education, or if it's because a lot of employers look for at least having a high school diploma, that is something that needs to be addressed. Something that I think is probably some of your organizations can work on. Yeah, we'll talk about that later, which all are going to be working on, but I don't even know if I'm going to be involved in that. But Jamie or somebody is going to lead that discussion later today. So that's kind of an long intro. I will say that Empower's 3 pillars, education, criminal justice, and work, really cross over each other a lot of ways, but especially in this topic. Because there are so many people in Mississippi. In fact, about 1 in 10 people in Mississippi have a felony criminal record. So
1 in 21.
1 in 10 adults, 1 in 10 adults have a felony in their past. And so we work to try to make sure, one, people can have a prison there to go into the labor force and to take a different path. Yeah. That's one part of our work. But also to try to remove as many barriers as it makes sense. So that if you have a felony on your record, then that follows you for the rest of your life. It's really like a life sentence in some ways for something that you may have done as a student, college student, or you may have been involved decades ago in something you did, but that felony still stays on your record. It can keep you from getting housing. It can keep you from getting a job. It can just be applied on you. It also keeps you from voting. And that's being looked at by the legislature. In fact, there's a hearing tomorrow on the where our CEO, Grant Gallen, will be speaking on restoring voting rights after people have served their sentence and possibly a little time after that. Long enough to show that they change their ways or whatever the qualifications would be, but to make sure that it doesn't become a lifelong sentence, doesn't stay a lifelong sentence. But that also keeps people from running for office, because you don't run for office if you're a registered voter. So there are lots of barriers to work in the criminal justice system. So I'm very impressed with you.
Well, I'm trying my best.
It's not been boring.
Following your lead here, but maybe awful little.
So with that, there are some good things that are happening in our economy. We have a lot more business coming in. We're not real thrilled with government subsidies and those things, but do that as it may. They are coming, and it will be a good thing overall for whether it's Amazon and more so even Amazon itself for the offshoots that will come opportunities for small businesses to get involved, whether it's electricians or HVAC people and that type of thing, it's gonna be a lot of those. All right, so covered what the definitions of labor force are. Yeah. Actually, farther on now. So there have been some steps. Yes. Right place.
Are you gonna send these slides out, by the way? Okay.
There have been some things that have been attempted to address these things. The career coaches is something that's fairly new. The community colleges, I understand, have had navigator.
I'm gonna go there every day.
Adult Ed, yeah, Adult Ed has had something similar. But the career coaches now are in the high schools. I heard they're also in middle schools. And this school year, that was started, there are now career coaches in every school district that requested them. And so these are people who are not employed by the Department of Education or by the school districts. And so they are freer to do more things, more options, things they can do. That is probably, again, it's fairly new, but at least anecdotally, there have been some really good stories about people, kids who were going to be dropping out. And so a career coach can come in and help them see opportunities or know about opportunities in their local area or beyond their local area or their future. So that they're not, this is something in Mississippi that, and maybe this is common place, especially rural areas, but even in the cities where if this is for adults too, this is not even going to matter. In Mississippi, we tend to have a negative view of ourselves. And part of that, I believe, is, and part of the lack of innovation sometimes, is because we do have a very small world that we tend to live in. And we don't see the opportunities that in a different part of my work that I'm not going through right now. But what I found is that people who are most successful in certain things that I'm working on are people who either have been in the military or have otherwise lived outside of Mississippi at some point in their lives. They come back. So just getting a broader perspective of the world and how other people do things, I think is very important. We do want them to come back to Mississippi, but and so the brain drain is something to be concerned about, but also, I've not thought about this till right now, but maybe if any of y'all use this term, then I'll demand woes. And maybe the brain boomerang is what we really
I like that.
might want to think about, because we do want people to have experience elsewhere, but we want them to come back. I know that Mississippi Economic Council has been working with some universities, contacting their alumni who live out of state. And I think it's in like a certain age range. Young people, from my perspective, 30 to 45, something like that. And asking them why they left Mississippi. Are they interested in coming back? And is there anything that's hindering them coming back other than just they want to finish whatever it is they're doing? And I'm not sure if they've compiled the results of that yet, but that will be very interesting.
On point to that, I think that, when you look at neighboring states like Alabama or Louisiana or Tennessee, I think the reason they really leave Mississippi, we don't have urban centers. Like in Alabama, you have, Mobile, you have Birmingham, you have now Huntsville. That's really surpassed Birmingham. As well. When you got Tennessee, you have Nashville, you have Knoxville, you have Memphis. And I think young people like urban centers, and we just don't have that in the state. Because, and I think when they go and they live in those urban areas, my nephew, he grew up in the Delta in Tunica, and now he's in New Orleans. He works for Shell. And he just said to me 2 weeks ago, he said, I wish I could move Shell to Mississippi because he preferred to be in Mississippi. But, you know, the job is in New Orleans.
Some of y'all will remember William Bennett, who was President Reagan's Secretary of Education, and then
Right.
drug czar, and then he wrote the Book of Virtues. That were stories through kids. He, for a time, early in his career, taught at University of Southern Mississippi. And he said when he asked people where in Mississippi to go to have fun, they said Memphis, New Orleans, and Mobile.
Yeah.
So you're right. For those of you that didn't hear the comment, it was that Mississippi lacks urban centers that are attractive to the younger people. So that contributes to the brain drain.
I think it has a big contributing factor to that. That even for those that live here and travel outside, and I agree that, you know, exposure is important. But I think that, I don't know how we're gonna overcome that.
I think the only way you do is a lot of thoughtful planning and purpose in creating spaces like that, like Tennessee, you know, years ago, it wasn't quite as booming as it is now, but there's been a lot of planning and thought gone into building up Brentwood and all these places, which have a little extra
Yeah.
influx.
Yeah, but even, you know, even like in Memphis, that's been the capital of North Mississippi
Yeah,
forever. But you know, you're seeing the exodus from Memphis to DeSoto County, case in point, and now spilling over to Marshall County. But I don't want to get off take. But they haven't planned for that as well.
well,
I mean, go up Goodman Road. No planning. But anyway, so I think that's, you know, I think if we had more, because they're just lured to that.
Yeah.
Most are, not all.
You know,
Okay.
I'll just add an observation that I had recently, in downtown Jackson. You know, Jackson State has kind of taken residence over the Walpole Lofts, so they're housing students in in that building. I've heard that they're talking with the Marriott maybe about using that for housing. And I've been through downtown, coming up Capitol Street in the evening time, and there's people everywhere. And it just makes me feel good to see that there's a life downtown and it's young people. And if they're gonna be living there while they're in school, we gotta create a plan for them to stay down there when they finish school too. Because we've got all this property, this residential property that's downtown, so that, you know, to your point, like we gotta create these plans around that. But if you drive downtown on a any night now, because they've got buses that are shuttling the students from where they're living to the campus and back, and it's going all day, and I don't know about all night, but like there's activity that's happening down there that now it's only because we're housing people down there.
But I would just say to that, that, but also you're aware of that and it's happening, but the perception of Jackson outside of Jackson is not very good.
True.
So how do you overcome that? Because I hear and I believe you, but as a Mississippian, I would be reluctant to even go near that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the reality. And the other thing, and I'm not going to dominate the conversation for us, as I can, but we can't get past our image. For some reason, Birmingham, you know, they had bombing, they bombed the church. We can't get past our image in the city. I don't know how we're going to get past that negative image. And not only is it believed outside of Mississippi, but within the state itself, you know, by and large. So we need to work on that.
I think we often overlook as a community that Jackson itself is a hub of education. Within a 5-mile radius, not only do we have Jackson State, we have Millsap, Spellhaven, we have the nursing school, we have so many schools here that are full of imports and children that are here. I think what we lack is, one, keeping the kids here once they graduate and expose them to careers that are available to higher education next door, and then showing them exposure once they graduate. But what I'm hearing a lot of is, well, we want to catch them when they got out of jail. And what I would like to see is a more proactive place when we start getting exposed to the decrements of the bill of low income areas around 13, 12. And I think from my personal experience is that that's where we start losing our economic power. It's trying to catch it on the latter end already left the house. Furthermore, I would like to add, as a Jacksonian, I would like to add to the perspective and a former news head, while we also have all of these colleges, every last one of your TV stations are in the Jackson City limits. So as a former news producer, it is easier for me to send out that crew up the street from me off Raymond Road than to find that crime scene in Flowood. By the time I get over there, it's going to be cleaned up, right? And before they put it out on their radio. Then I find out it's cleaned up and now they've got time to make a press conference. So there is that. Just, it's easy to catch the low hanging fruit for ratings. Just saying.
Yeah.
But I do think we're not, as a state, catching all of the students and economic impact. We're a college town and we ignore that.
That's a good point. But also to that point, and it's just that when you look at, because everybody's driven by money, and I hear this all the time, that, we're not at the Southeastern average, but we're also not at the Southeastern average when it comes to cost of living and housing and other opportunities. And I don't think we talk about that enough as well. Financial literacy.
Yeah.
What a dollar will buy in Mississippi, you need $2. No, you need $4 in New York City and 10 in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
So
and
they
that's-
don't have
that is one thing that we're planning to look at too, is the cost of living. And that's kind of a double-edged sword too, because we market ourselves as a low-wage state, but I think that's also what keeps people from staying. So, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. But for those that, I don't know if y'all can hear online the comments from somebody say yes or no, that you can hear the comments from the audience. Or a thumbs up, or if y'all come to sleep. Everybody's
If they're all asleep.
Maybe this will, sorry, this, little immature comment here that, in looking at labor force participation around the world, the country that has the lowest labor force participation rate overall is the country of Djibouti, which is right next to Somalia, Eritrea, and those countries in Mexico. So I thought it would be clever to have somebody run for president there, like we would have somebody run for governor here and say, "Get Mississippi to work." There's a slogan would be, "Get Djibouti to work."
Ha ha ha.
I
like that. Go to sleep.
That way
Write
they-
that down. Put Djibouti to work.
All right, let me, I don't know.
One quick question about the labor.
Like 5 minutes.
Or
8 minutes.
in the data that you have, what's considered a working wage?
That's not in this.
Okay. So if you're working part-time, and that's like you get at a local fast food restaurant, you're making minimum wage, and you still have to qualify for state benefits, is that in this anywhere or?
That is not in this.
Okay.
Can I say though that there was a report that was produced one time, it was a group out of DC, I forgot their name, and they did put out what was a livable wage according to family size. Can't remember, it was women in progress, something like that.
Yeah.
And they did partner with, I think Hope here, and that report may still be out there, but I can remember that, like, say if you were a single parent with 2 children, like started like at $15 per hour would be like a starting livable wage, something like that. That might have been a single parent with 1 child.
It can't be more than one child. I have a lot to say about that. Besides,
That was old.
yes. One of my cohorts in my doctoral program, her doctoral thesis, doctoral dissertation, was on livable wages. So
On the way.
livable wages in Mississippi. So, and she and I, we kind of overlapped a little bit. I wasn't looking at livable wages. I was just minimum wage policy. But hers, she found things that weren't exactly like shocking, but definitely that one living wage dramatically higher than it would what people would reports were dictating it was 3 years ago. Well, 3 years at the time of our writing, it's like 2020, 2021. They dictated it was around like $13 or something like that. Her reports were finding it was like 15, 16, 17, and it got higher and higher and higher, depending on the stage, for Mississippi being the cheapest state to live in right now. But as for kids, that price increases every year to basically keep a kid alive to 18 will require a far higher wage or a lot of more benefits from the government than it required to like.
Well, and that's something that affects nonprofits is, y'all probably know, is the higher the wage, the harder it is for you to manage the budget. So there's some nonprofits that are looking at $15 an hour mandated wage, and they generally are more, liberal side, so they like that general idea, but they said, we can't do that.
She spoke to a nonprofit last week about that exact. She's like, I'm struggling to find the money to pay my employees at $15 an hour. But yeah, I'm
just real quick. Mentioned that the low high school diploma is the lowest low report. This is population. So the people who have just a high school diploma and nothing more, growing. Less than high school is declining. I think part of that's because people who are older, who didn't get either a high school or a college education, that's as they die out, then the statistics are naturally going to go up to some degree. Real quickly on age, as you would expect, age 25 to 54 is the highest participation rate. The lowest is 65 and older. But all of those, our population in Mississippi of 65 and older is really growing, 30% higher, 23 than in 2010. That's the time frame of our report. The population and the participation rate of 16 to 24 has declined. On race, I was really happy to see this evidence of this, that there really is no difference in black and white population participation. So, hopefully overcoming some of the stereotypes, but then if it works, if it doesn't. In fact, the labor force participation rate of blacks is like 1% higher than whites. So,
Is that the same income as whites?
just whether they're employed or not. So it could be that 1 hour a week. It could be 40 or 50 hours a week. They're employed. A lot more, not a lot more, but there's more females in Mississippi than males, but males are going to work both force at significantly higher rate. Trying to honor my time here. Okay, let's get to the last one. So our email address that we're using to collect feedback and questions, further things, all the further research and all that. Research at empowerns.org. Again, this report is on site. It's on our website, empowerns.org. As our supplemental things that I mentioned. As you may know, volunteer work does not count as labor force as being employed. It's checking in every notice that we found extensive proof since we produced the report. Somebody called it a spatial mismatch, that you can train people all you want, but if the jobs are elsewhere, then if people aren't willing to do jobs, and a huge part is talking about government benefits and how they can be a disincentive to work. So especially in COVID, more in other states than here, still here some period of the longer the benefits lasted, the longer people stayed out of the labor force. There are some states that limit the unemployment insurance payments to somehow based on job availability. And they only have a certain number of weeks based on how many jobs are out there. In the states that have done that, they find that people find jobs. Often 75% of people found jobs that they get within 2 weeks. So again, people are using logical reasoning if they think that it's called the benefits cliff. That if you make a little bit more money, you lose your benefits. That's another thing we're going to be exploring. That's a little bit more long term of how to address the benefits cliff. Because according to one estimate that we saw on another one, it's fairly similar. That if you once you get to earning $30,000, that with the benefits that you lose, you don't actually start breaking even again until close to $70,000. So I've talked to employers who said that they had employees who refused pay raises and promotion because they would lose their benefits. And that actually is a financially avoiding all the bigger issues of dependence and that type of thing. And that is a financially sound decision on their part. One last thing that I'll say about our whole approach to this is we do look at this as important to the economy of the state and the country and of individual economies of how well people are doing financially, how they grow. Again, we're about eliminating barriers to help people rise, reach what God created them to do. And but there's more to that than just financial benefit. That in work there is dignity, there is self-worth, there's growing, not just in the job you're doing, but there's growth beyond that. It also affects families because children of people who are not workers have more stress, they have more mental health problems, they do less well educationally, they're more likely to be involved. So all of those things are related to work. So it's not just a matter of you go to work, so I don't have to keep paying for this. It is the value of the person that we are focused on primarily. So backing out that, what are the policies that I implement? So any ideas or thoughts that y'all have on any of that?
I'm curious if there's any knowledge of when the census people make phone calls. We know if they're mostly calling cities or towns or rural places, or are they only calling landlines, which a lot of people don't even have anymore? You know, I'm just curious how that could sway the numbers.
Yeah, I understand, and I've asked about the response rate in urban versus rural. And I've gotten a little bit of picture on that. That's out there how accurate it is, sure. But it is true that people in rural areas tend to be, and you mentioned this, much more in cash economy, where because people in rural areas don't generally get audited. So there's a lot of people who just work for cash. Employers who have said, I can only have employees if I just pay cash. I can't get people to work for me W-2 or pay. So that's a real issue that we're going to be delving into how the cash economy works as well. We've got a lot of delve. So yeah, welcome to your input, your participation.
But I also think that getting back to just talking about the living wage, I mean, what's a living wage? And, but through the tax system, and I've heard this before, people don't get cash payments, but they'll earn income credit. you know, they can, I think that's one of the cliffs that they fall off of. You know, who work and they know what that salary point is, they'll quit.
Yeah.
So that they, you know, they may get $10,000 and that's non-taxable. So when you look at the tax rate on that, you're talking about 40% increase. So I think those are policy issues that really need to be, they have made some changes to that. So when you talk about people making $15 an hour, they get child tax credits, they get earning income tax credits, they get, you know, all kinds of credits that they're not aware of. And no one is explaining it to them. So it's just not as simple as the $15 an hour.
There's also a case of, I know personally someone who has a doctoral degree who has had to turn down, you know, wage increases because she would be kicked out of these benefits. And I think that's, well, there's two things, there's two discussions to be had on this. It's one is the, how we divvy out benefits like that, credit and tax credits. And two is how we portion out the wages for what's the baseline for like how we want somebody to be paid in this country for the bare minimum amount of work. And we don't want to get those two confused because that's two different discussions to be had on that.
You know,
But
just because you have a doctor, it depends on what it is. I tell employees, you know, everybody wants to make more, but I'd like to make what a doctor makes, but I just don't have I didn't have the background or desire. So, you know, supply and demand
I think
is going to drive everything.
Absolutely.
Basic economics.
Can we say, this
okay.
is great, can we save this for the
Yeah.
end? Because that's where we're gonna have common, like, discussion. We do have Jessica that's online that's gonna join us and be thinking of any other questions you may have around this. And, I didn't print this baby because I can't read, although I can see things very well, but I just forgot to change my paper size in the printer. But it did help me read it pretty well too. But I have, yes, it is. And I have some questions that I have out of this too. But he did bring a few copies, and you can also get it online, and we'll send the link to the report, and we'll share the presentation as well. For everybody online and for those that are in the room. And next we have Jessica from the National Council of Nonprofits, who the Alliance is a member of that organization that really kind of serves as the statewide, the national nonprofit supporter, kind of like we do for our nonprofits at the state level. So they work directly with all the state associations. So they have a report that they released last year on the nonprofit workforce shortage on a national level. So we've invited her to join us today and share about that. So, you ready, Jessica?
I think so. Let me know
Okay.
if you can see the actual presentation as not the fancy presenter view that sometimes comes up in these kinds of moments.
It looks great. We can see the presentation. We can hear you clearly, so you're good to go.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'll just share a little bit about myself before I really get in, just because it might feel weird hearing from a complete stranger over Zoom. So hopefully, WebEx. So hopefully, after this, I'm not a complete stranger. Just a little about me. I do live in DC now, but I am from New York City. I'm also the first in my family to graduate from college and to get a master's degree. So my background is in data analysis, but more importantly, it's just like making numbers make sense, questioning where numbers come from, how we're reporting on them, and how can we use that for advocacy and to show where gaps exist and what we can do about them. And that will come up throughout the report. And so any questions you may have, I like that it's more of a conversation and not necessarily a lecture. Those are not fun for anyone. So that's a little about me. And let's see, I should be able to advance the slides now. Yes, so who we are as a National Council of Nonprofits, we are essentially the alliance, but at the national level. So we work with state associations of nonprofits all around the country, and we work through public policy, making sure that we know the solutions that we can advance, the challenges that nonprofits might be facing, and just making sure that we know that we are not alone in our work. What you might be experiencing could be a trend in another state. And so just knowing that collaborations can come from anywhere, starting with this network and even with this room that we're in right now. So when it comes to nonprofit workforce shortages, I'll focus on two things. So what we know about the shortage crisis, and a lot of it's informed by our 2023 survey and other external factors that we might see in the news or that we hear from nonprofits when we go around the country and have conversations. But also we know that with every challenge, there might be a solution that might have been there the whole time or that we might not have considered before. So the practical solutions that I'll break down are nonprofit operations and public policy solutions to support or to know about or that we might consider warning against, because sometimes there are unintended consequences and we want to minimize those because it affects not just nonprofits, but also communities. And so how do we get to this point? I always like to say that we should always try to make space in a conversation for people who might normally not speak up, because it's by doing that that we're able to think about what might be, what is missing, what are we not seeing. And all of this work really began with one question that started in a coalition call. Is anyone else seeing this? So one person talked about just the fact that they couldn't recruit staff, that staff was leaving, there was high turnover. And after that question was asked, we started a survey back in 2021, and over 1,000 nonprofits around the country shared their experiences with workforce shortages, and not just the impact on their nonprofit, but also the impact on communities, especially in 2021 when they were saying, you know, we have to turn people away because we just don't have the capacity to provide these services, or we're seeing increased costs like with inflation and things like that. So more than anything, there are people and stories behind the numbers that I would share, and just, yeah, mostly that. I'm trying to like also hold space for the people and the stories that I hear about when I do the survey analysis, but also when I'm having conversations with people. So what we've learned about the workforce shortage crisis, starting with the results. The main recruitment and retention challenges that nonprofits reported. I also mentioned that this survey is by nonprofits and for nonprofits. We have seen a lot of challenges with data at the national level. Sometimes we just don't know how many people work at a nonprofit at a given moment. So there wasn't a lot of coverage or a lot of data around the workforce shortage specific to nonprofits. So by getting this information, we're able to better point to anything more specific to the nonprofit sector. So the main challenge that was reported back in 2023 was salary competition. Just it came down to people saying, like, I have people leaving my nonprofit because they'd rather work at a fast food chain because they need to pay their bills, and we recognize that. A lot of nonprofits say we want to expand because we are seeing an increased demand for services, but we just don't have the budget to hire more people. A lot of people are just simply exhausted, and so stress and burnout was also a main challenge. And one that came up recently is challenges caused by government grants and contracting practices. We've heard cost of living adjustments and other phrases, and sometimes when you're in a contract with either a state or local government, a lot of the times there isn't an adjustment for inflation, or it's just really hard to secure a contract that matches what is happening right now with the economy. And just the lack of affordable childcare. It was something that maybe we hadn't been tracking as closely, but after the survey came out, it's just something we became fully aware of, that you need a healthy childcare sector in order to have a healthy economy, to have a healthy community. When people cannot afford childcare, you cannot afford to work. And there's a lot of things that maybe seem very intuitive, but having a number to match those kinds of cases makes it more convincing to advocate for solutions. Nonprofits were also invited to share what else they're seeing other than the challenges I just mentioned. So others said it's just all of the above. We are having all these challenges at once, and so we have a hard time with recruitment and retention. I also heard about just affordable housing. Sometimes you want to hire someone, but the person simply cannot afford to move to the place where the nonprofit is located. Or sometimes they say, I can no longer afford to live here, so I need to move somewhere else when I can't afford to find housing. And that's just something that is really hard to find a solution to because it requires just a lot of thought. Like I think someone said, just planning and purpose. Like how do we make a community more, I guess, competitive to have more nonprofits be able to recruit and retain staff? Other inequities with like wage and compensation gaps, just taking a closer look at how we implement salary and benefits and knowing that not everyone might be paid the same, and just some people realizing that and choosing to leave. But then when people leave, they might be taking institutional knowledge with them that is hard to replace. Some communities, you know, English is not always the main language spoken in a community. And so a lot of the times with certain demographic changes, it's really hard for a nonprofit to adapt. And so some people say, I need to be paid more for speaking more than one language, or different conversations like that. That's been reported by nonprofits too. Or simply hiring delays, especially when it comes to background checks. A lot of folks say that they are going through the background check process, and then the candidate gets a little impatient and chooses to withdraw their application. I'll pause for any reactions or comments or questions on the challenges.
Hey, Jessica, I have a question. Did you see that some of these factors were more prevalent in certain areas in the country, or was it just universal?
This is the aggregate, and we did also break it down by nonprofits primarily serving Black, Indigenous, and other people of color communities, those by subsectors, and those, and also by state. So yes, depending on the role of the nonprofit, that was exacerbated in some way. So human service providers definitely saw more challenges with grants and contracting, since they're more likely to have a grant and contract with the government.
I see that Quinn raised his hand with a question.
So yes, looking at all of these challenges that individuals are facing, how is connectivity rolled into this discussion? With all this money being spent to give people access to affordable internet for them to invest in workforce development. In Mississippi, what we're hoping to see is that we're going to reach the unreached, those that have not potentially had the ability to participate for whatever reason. So, what is your thoughts on connectivity and how it could bridge some of these challenges?
I think at the beginning of just, yes, I'm going to answer the question, but sometimes I answer with an anecdote. Just knowing that at the beginning of the pandemic, it was really hard for a lot of folks to even switch to the world of being online, and that left a lot of people behind. And so maybe in some ways, while there is more funding that is going out the door, either through the State Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, American Rescue Plan Act, just all these other programs are getting money out the door, it's still like playing a game of catch up. So even if right now, let's say every single community that did not have like a full infrastructure set up, it's still making up for like 3 years worth of like lost learning. Especially we're seeing that now with like schools and just children just starting to catch up, and we're gonna see those effects maybe 5 or 10 years from now, and that will create a whole new set of maybe challenges when it comes to pipelines into the nonprofit sector.
Okay, because what we're hoping to see is that by getting these affordable connections out there and helping people finding ways to transition over to broadband-based entertainment, they would in then turn to have access to CTE, workforce, as well as adult ed services at the community colleges. So our association is partnering with the community colleges to do just that. So we applied for 11,957 to be exact million to NTIA for what we call digital opportunity and skills work in Mississippi, so that we can go into communities, because there's just still a lot of people that, believe it or not, in rural America that have no idea what broadband is, how to use it, and how to make that transition. So if we can educate those individuals to reallocate resources, what I call ditch the dish, and moving away from dish-based entertainment. They can actually afford their connectivity and get all of the lanyap services that comes along with that, such as, educational improvement, telehealth, the whole, where we can, I think we can make up a lot of time that we've lost by getting into their households and educating them on how to catch up.
I agree. There were things as time goes on, there's one more thing you need to be able to fully participate in the workforce. At one point it was landlines, now it's internet. I don't know what the next thing will be, but yeah, to your point, like we definitely need to make sure that as much money and infrastructure is set up so that people can fully participate. Any other questions or comments to the recruitment and retention challenges?
I'm curious with budgets are always a challenge for nonprofits, but after COVID, I'm curious if you heard more about budgets being down because of event fundraising not being very attractive to people anymore. I'm just curious about that.
I would say maybe in the first maybe 1 or 2 years, maybe 2021, 2022, some nonprofits might have had actually not necessarily a surplus, but I think funding that would have gone towards event planning, especially conferences and in-person events, might have actually gone towards like bonuses for staff or just finding ways to keep staff on the payroll. And then suddenly by 2023 and now this year with so many events coming back in person, now that money is no longer there. And with that comes a whole new set of challenges because now people need to see your name out there and just trying to find that balance of, well, we hired this person and now we might not be able to keep them on the payroll.
Could you elaborate on challenges caused by government grants and contracts?
Yes. So a lot of the times when a nonprofit starts or enters a contract or receives a grant from a local or state government, they might not receive the money on time. Some nonprofits say that we've actually been waiting for years to get this reimbursement because a lot of the times the grants and contracting practice defaults to reimbursement. Upfront payments are an option. I think just a lot of state and local governments choose not to follow that. But at the federal level, there are new guidelines in effect that encourage upfront payments instead of defaulting to reimbursement. So just like different things like that, or not allowing for indirect costs to be covered by a grant or a contract. Other delays when it comes to payments, if there's a multi-year grant or contract, not having like a cost of living adjustment or having some kind of inflation adjustment, because at some point people say keeping this flat is actually a decrease in funding instead of what it's intended to be.
So if you're a nonprofit, let's use an example of the health department receives federal funding and they're a pass-through a competitive grant process to nonprofits. You're actually receiving the money from the state government, but it's federal funding. And most of the time that's reimbursable. So if you're having to upfront the cost to run the programs and salary and other budget items, then you submit that to get reimbursed. And so sometimes the nonprofit can't make their payroll until they get reimbursed. And so there have, like she said, there have been some changes to the government grants contracting process. We're actually going to be doing some training on that and creating a toolkit around how to be grant ready for federal grants and local government grants, and then also grant management on the back side of it. So we're working on putting those resources together. But we have consultants that we do all of our programming at the Alliance utilizing our consultants, and we have some that have their expertise is in federal grant writing. So if you ever have questions or if you have received some funding, need help with grant management or completing an application or anything, let us know. We can get you connected to those that have that expertise in it.
Yeah. I've also heard stories about nonprofits literally have to take out a line of credit just to be able to keep folks on the payroll while they wait for that reimbursement. So little things like that. It's hearing from nonprofits and their experience, and we're able to kind of pinpoint the exact challenge and then find a solution, not just in RN through trainings, but also through policy and other regulations that can make it easier to not just apply for, but be able to manage and report on grants. If I can continue. Yes. And other challenges that we heard from the survey and that we've also seen, not just through media, but also by hearing from nonprofits, is charitable giving. So we have seen many reports that indicate that a lot of nonprofits are seeing decreases in the number of donors and also decreases in donations, and that combining with all these other challenges that we've talked about can make it hard to operate at full capacity. And just natural disasters. A lot of nonprofits, there are responders to to natural disasters, and when they're in the front lines, sometimes they themselves might be impacted by the natural disaster and are unable to provide services or to be able to respond to all kinds of natural disasters. And we also mentioned the public health emergency that ended last year, but we're not hearing as many stories about that anymore. But those top three came from the survey, and nonprofits were indicating that these are the challenges that they're seeing. And yes, we've also mentioned rising costs and legislation. Sometimes like a line item in the budget can cut funding for a program, and then the nonprofit's no longer able to apply for grant for that program, or sometimes there might be legislation that makes it harder for nonprofits to operate in specific subsectors. And the local landscape, a lot of nonprofits mentioned that sometimes depending on what their mission is, it might be harder for them to continue operating because there might be some hostility that they're facing and just a lot of animosity towards the nonprofit and its mission. And getting into the solutions that were reported by nonprofits, starting with just operations, we did ask nonprofits, what have been some steps you've taken to be able to address some of these challenges? And a lot of them said, back to an earlier question, that we looked at our budget and we made some modifications and we were able to go with some salary increases, just short term, hopefully long term. Others were able to implement some sort of remote work option, either full-time or hybrid. I've heard of nonprofits just giving up the lease entirely so they can go fully online. But again, not every nonprofit can do that because a lot of them provide direct services. Others made adjustments to their benefits, like additional paid time off, or just having more time, like for breaks. I know a very popular practice that has emerged is like having a whole week off between during the holidays or during the summer so that folks can recharge. They also report about one-time bonuses. And when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, just having more trainings or looking at their policies and making sure that it is aligned with what diversity, equity, and inclusion can mean for a nonprofit. Career advancement is usually like looking at just professional development, either having a stipend or looking at ways that they can support their staff and be able to become future nonprofit leaders. We also heard about mental health and wellness programs and letting folks know that they are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So if you work at a nonprofit and you make 10 years worth of payments for your federal student loans, you are eligible to have your federal student loans forgiven once you make those 10 years worth of payments. And signing bonuses, I think folks were saying that we were getting pretty desperate at one point. So we really just wanted folks to be able to say yes to the job. I'll pause again for any reactions or comments on these.
I think for those of us that work for nonprofits, we feel all of that deeply.
Yeah.
I think that's most everybody in the room, but you too over there, maybe.
And again, we like to make space for nonprofits and for nonprofit professionals to be able to share their experiences and just what they think a solution could be. So some solutions that nonprofits propose in the survey just cover the full cost, have more unrestricted funding opportunities so that the nonprofit can cover staff salaries and other things like professional development that I mentioned, and just equipment. I've heard many times that we really thought we can get this grant or this contract, and turns out we just cannot afford to accept it anymore. Equity, nonprofits often say that one grant has this kind of funding structure set up and another has a very conflicted one. So over time, that can lead to different inequities when it comes to salaries and benefits, depending on who you hire to do the work on a specific grant or contract. To the previous presentation, what is the pipeline into the nonprofit sector? What are the programs that can incentivize people to think about nonprofits and to consider working at a nonprofit, either through fellowships, internships, maybe in apprenticeships, just like what is the pipeline for future professionals? And we've also heard from nonprofits saying that they think about just a lot of barriers to employment, like transportation, different certifications. If they want to stay a nonprofit and they realize they have to get this new license, that can be very expensive. So how can we make it easier for nonprofit professionals who want to stay in the sector to do that instead of leaving elsewhere? And last but not least, we hear this a lot. Just please remember that not all nonprofits are the same. There are nonprofits out there, and please remember who we are and how we operate. Just pausing again for any more questions or reactions.
Well, I would just reaction. I mean, I don't think this is shocking to anybody in the room here, but a lot of funders that grant funders, they won't pay for salaries. And that is one of the most frustrating things to me, I think, as a development person, is that you cannot do your work if you can't pay for the people to do the work. Right. And I think that so many more nonprofits would flourish if funders understood that more. So I don't know if that's an educational thing. Of course, there's a level of comfort that a funder has to have with an organization to believe that it's a needed position. But at the same time, you know, if they trust you to put it into a program, I'm not sure I understand why they don't trust you to pay for someone's salary who's a part of the program. And that could support a lot more nonprofits, I think.
I agree. And part of the reason why we made sure to have that in the report is that it doesn't come across as anecdotal. Like, you can point to this report and say, there are other nonprofits that agree with the sentiment, and it's documented here that there are workforce shortages, and this is one solution. So please consider in your future grant making, taking that into account. So we're hoping that by having things like this in writing, especially like in a report that's, you know, available nationwide and free to everybody, more funders can see this and say, I can do things differently.
Thank you.
And some public policy solutions that emerged throughout the survey and the results and the analysis is, we talked a lot about government grants and contracting reform. So making sure that there's less of a reliance on reimbursement as the payment, as a way to pay nonprofits, and thinking more about upfront payments or other ways that nonprofits can be able to apply, manage, and report on grants. Changes to the way that people can support nonprofits through charitable giving, making it easier, or what are the incentives that exist out there and how can we make those more available to more households, and increasing access to affordable childcare. A lot of people have said that, again, you can't have a healthy economy without childcare, and how do we increase access to that? So these have emerged as the main public policy solutions, but we know that there might be others that you could also be considering. I think affordable housing has come up in other conversations too.
Hey, Jessica, can you touch on the advocacy that's been done around getting the nonprofit workforce data in the BLS reports?
Yes. So we know that it's sometimes very hard to find data on nonprofits, especially as employers. We know that we are the third largest private workforce, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics makes that available only every 5 years, really. And the last time we saw an update was, well, previous to this year was 2017, and a lot has changed since then. So there was new data that came out in 2024, but that's based on data from 2022. So that's already out of date. And to be able to respond to challenges when it comes to employment numbers and wages and salaries, We need more frequent data, and just about every sector in the economy receives data on a quarterly basis. And yet the data that we got this year, again, is like 2 years old already. So we are encouraging and advocating for funding so that the Bureau of Labor Statistics can report more frequently on nonprofits, and also just more data on the nonprofit sector, not just at the state level, but getting down to the county, maybe even the census tract level. I think the ask this year was for 8 million. That didn't get through this year, but we had a letter to encourage the president to act through executive action, but we'll try again every single time until we are able to know that we can get this funding.
And that's something that the Alliance supports through the council and also the United Philanthropy Forum, because we support, as the Alliance, we represent our nonprofits, which is our direct service providers, but also our funders. So we're part of United Philanthropy Forum as well. So we've signed on to the letters that have been submitted. We have done some advocacy with our members of Congress around that. So when the next time to push that comes, what we may do is, in addition to signing on to letters at the national level, we may do some state advocacy. So that's where we would ask our nonprofits at the state level to help us in supporting a policy around that.
Yes, because I mean, we've seen a lot of things can happen when you just don't have accurate data or timely data, or just any data really about the nonprofit sector, like we're seeing right now. And last but not least, just 2 resources to take away from this: the workforce survey results, that's on our website, and I listed my email address in case you want to follow up with any questions or comments about the survey, how we reach this, and just any other thoughts about workforce development and nonprofits.
I think
that's all I had.
Okay. I think a question came through the chat, but I couldn't read it before it left. If you want to look at that.
It's a comment in the plan. It just says, I've noticed that nonprofits are highly scrutinized, and it's almost an afterthought. They also need to come to operate. Things cost so much, and our overhead is the highest it's ever been.
True.
I mean, it seems like that, you know, when you made that point and it just resonated with me. I mean, you try to, you know, you want to affect change and you want to bring change, but it costs to do it. And, you know, the good old days of, you know, 10% or whatever that number looks like, you know, it's hard to operate in those single digit administrative figures. It absolutely is. So I think if we could do, you know, Jamie, I would encourage, that's something the Alliance could, you know, make an awareness of operations of these nonprofits, just like any other business, is up and more expensive than it ever is.
Yeah. Hey, Quinn, I'm curious on that NTIA grant. Is it a upfront funded grant, or is it reimbursable?
It's reimbursable. So I got to float $1.957 million.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah.
So
That-
if I get it, if I get it and you see me coming to knock on your door, you better lock it.
Listening to the 2 reports, there's an interesting connection, and I don't know, maybe y'all can help me work through it. But Forrest, it comes to a question to you, I think, or maybe just input from you. I think I read in y'all's report that a lower labor force participation rate tends to increase the burden on government services and benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we've, as a state, cut taxes, which decreases funding for those certain benefits. Is that right?
Not necessarily.
Or it could decrease revenue that would be available to you.
Yeah, I mean, generally, more at the national level, tax cuts actually increase government revenue because there's more activity that's taxed. State level, it's not quite as clear that that's the case, but certainly our revenue as a state has been growing. So it's not necessarily the case. And to the extent that the tax burden is something that hinders people from creating jobs, you know, businesses from creating jobs, then And a lower tax rate will presumably increase the number of jobs. And so again, at the national level, that's definitely been shown over and over again. So not necessarily.
There's almost, I guess, then an interesting connection, because if there's a shortage in the nonprofit labor force and an increased need for those services because of a low labor force participation rate, there's a gap where the government may not be filling in services to individuals who aren't in the workforce, and the nonprofits are not able to provide those services because of a shortage of labor.
Yeah, if I don't know if you put it on a scale, which side would be up and which side would be down, but the more people that are not working, the more people are relying on social service providers like our nonprofits. So
Yeah.
our food pantries, our after school, I mean, just all of them are overburdened. And so now I think that attributes to some of the factors in the nonprofit workforce shortage around burnout. And you've got these nonprofits that are operating on shoestring budgets, and they're having more people coming to them for services, and it's burning their staff out. And then they need to hire more people to be able to provide those services and meet the demand, but they don't have the funding, going back to Dina's point, because grants don't typically pay for salaries. And so it's just like this ripple effect of, I guess, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? It's like, how do you figure out the solution to that? And I would also say, where I'm thinking, the direction that I'm kind of thinking we could go in is around, you said in your report, Jessica, the professional pipeline, but I think we say the nonprofit professional pipeline. So how do we tap into the 47% or the 53% of people that are not working and provide some type of training, programming, education, or something to put them into that nonprofit professional pipeline, while at the same time we've got to be figuring out how do we work better with funders to change the way that they're funding, so that our nonprofits, as there becomes this pool of people that are eligible to work in the nonprofit sector now, but our providers have to have the funding to be able to hire them and have them on staff.
I think without the funding pipeline, you can train people all day long, but if you can't pay them,
Right.
and
Mhm.
then you can't really afford to hire them.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I mean, it to me, it gets to the point of ridiculousness, even when you're trying to fund schools. A school, like we have a school in the Delta that we fund almost entirely by grants, but you wouldn't believe how many people want to support education, but they won't pay for teachers. You're like, what do you think is the biggest cost for education? It's the teaching. It's not the books. It's not the building. It's the teachers that you need to teach the kids. So it's almost like a mental block, I think, that our country has, that providing salary funding for nonprofits would somehow make them all become terrible managers of the funding. I don't really know.
Can I dig into the comment about funders don't fund salaries? Are you talking about what a funder might consider overhead? So like the administrative cost of
It doesn't really matter. I mean, this has been my personal experience. Now, eventually, we have found some funders who are fine funding salaries for education, for example, but it doesn't really matter what the job is. In the grant world, there's many funders that I've run across that just will not pay for salaries. It doesn't matter what they do, whether they're a teacher, whether they're, leading programs, whether they're,
The reason I ask
doing
is that
anything.
if I use the pardon me for using the language of manufacturing for just a minute.
Mm-hmm,
They talk about cost of goods sold.
mm-hmm,
And I can translate this to
Right.
the for-profit, to the nonprofit world, but in the cost of goods sold, you build in the cost of labor to produce a product.
right.
So the equivalent for the nonprofits would be the cost to deliver a program.
Right.
Includes the percentage of somebody's time spent in the actual delivery.
Yes, but in grants, my experience has been, you do have all that in your budget. You know, they know this is the total cost of this program. And most of the time, the largest expenses a lot of those programs are the people that are delivering the program. And they'll pay for all the stuff that's not the person. They'll pay for other pieces of the program that delivery, like the food or the, gas for the van or the van even, but not the person that's going to have the job to deliver the food and do all that
I've
work.
seen kind of the opposite. If I can show direct, that this is a person that is in direct delivery of the service, that becomes part of the cost of the program. Different for management and administration, but even on that, many will say, I know that your management spends maybe 15% of their time in managing this program, so we can actually count 15% of their burdened salary, not just salary, but burdened salary
Uh-huh.
in the cost of the delivery of the program. So I guess where I'm going is it an issue of how we tell our story?
I think it's an issue of how they understand their stories.
Okay.
Because I feel like a lot of nonprofits are really clear that this is not working for the
So that
nonprofit
says,
side.
from an alliance standpoint, the focus should be
How
on talking to
funders understand
about,
the
because we
stories.
have been talking to them about a number of things along those lines, but to elevate the issue of covering the cost of
Uh-huh.
in the delivery of program.
I'd love to know Jessica's thought on it since you deal with people all over the country. Do you feel like this is an issue in nonprofits relaying what they need, or is it more of an issue of funders understanding how to actually help an organization thrive?
I think nonprofits generally have a pretty good sense of this is the work that we do, and this is what it takes to get, to carry out our mission. And going by line items like salaries and things like that. A very common story that I hear is a nonprofit gets a grant, very excited to get it. It's a lot of work went into it, and then they suddenly have to reject the grant because, again, you do need to hire more staff, not just to carry out the program, but specifically with grant writing, you need someone with that kind of experience to be able to not just manage the grant, but to report on it. And sometimes there's a gap in that, or the software sometimes, for whatever reason, maybe the grant maker, whether it's the state, local government, the federal government, or a foundation, it doesn't include the kind of software you need to be able to report on that. And just like little things like that, that this is missing. And nonprofits are pretty vocal about this is like maybe like the missing link you'd be able to succeed at, because it's very discouraging when a nonprofit does all this work to get a grant, and it's already hard enough to apply for a grant. Imagine getting it and then having to turn it down because you're not going to have the support you need to carry this program, knowing that you can, but because of little things like that. It's almost like when back to school, if you apply for college and you're really excited to get the acceptance letter, and then you realize you can't go anymore because of all these other expenses and little things that you realize that you just can't afford.
I would agree with that, but in a lot of cases, up front, well, I'm gonna need money for my food, and I'm gonna need money for books, and you put all that together, and then somebody goes, congratulations, you got into this college, we're gonna pay for everything except your apartment and your food. Well, now I can't go. It's because those are critical to being able to go. It's kind of the same way. Like, you can put all that together, and they do ask for all of it. They want to see what all the salary is. But I just find more often than not, they won't pay for the salary piece.
Or they'll only pay 40%.
Yeah, some small percentage.
And then you still have to have a match.
Right.
For the other percentage.
I think unfortunately, and I'm rather new to leading nonprofit work, but an actor, and I just got through watching the Christopher Reeves documentary. And somebody said something that just stuck with me. Like I said, I'm a new nonprofit leader. Nobody wonders how Superman eats, right? They just want him to come and rescue the day, pick up Lois, and go about your business, and let me go by mine. But you can't eat this. You can't do it this way. And I feel sometimes like as a newer nonprofit leader, that's just what people expect. They expect you to pull off these miracles, avoid the kryptonite, save the day, and then go away. And now realizing that this is a business, we just happen to have this label on us. But
Right.
we've got to eat too. And what I mean by eat, not that I'm trying to be at the buffet, but I do share my bread with my community. And for me to do that, I can't be starving and just keep
Right.
giving.
And you have to have qualified people that have the skills
Absolutely. And that
to
helps.
accomplish the programs
Mhm.
that you have set out, or can write the grants, which requires experience and knowledge.
And
Yeah.
just for perspective, let's not forget, may he rest in peace, Christopher Reeve, despite his tragedy, he still had to work. Right? And it's just double on top of it. That's the artist in me. I'm just thinking about it. But he still had to go out and create an income for himself and bring awareness to this nonprofit that he was highly invested in, both financially and physically, right? So I think that's what we run into it's a cultural issue that with nonprofits we're under this label that we just operate off glitter and rhinestones.
Yeah. Another thing, and Jamie, something that I think we could do a better job. And I say we as nonprofits, not the alliance. I think I'm a big fan of the alliance. That's not what I mean at all. But I think we could do a better job. And again, we being all of us nonprofits, of finding those partners that are willing to put that private equity or into these programs. But on the other hand, I'd love to see a study. Is private equity available or not, or philanthropy money as available as it was 10 years ago? Does that money actually flow like it used to flow? Because when I call nonprofits now, especially we're looking at operating in all 82 counties, and I'm trying to just bridge the gap for 2 or 3 months to get all this stuff pulled together, and I can't even raise $50,000. Something's changed on the philanthropy side too. So that would be an interesting study. Is okay. We all are aware that we're not going to be able to get these administrative costs or these salary costs, but what's happening to the philanthropy money?
It's also why in the report I did make, and in presentation I also made a point to say, remember small nonprofits. I think a lot of what exists right now is targeted towards maybe those with a larger staff size and a larger budget and are having an easier time reporting and applying for these grants. So I guess to go back to different analogies, I mean, like, if you think about Batman and Robin, Batman has all the money. Like, he's good, but Robin doesn't really have the same money as Batman. So he just needs a little extra gear, to be able to keep up with Batman. I don't think there's any lack of ability to do the superhero work. It's just like, what is the support that you need and how can we meet you halfway so that you're able to carry out that mission?
And, I think now's a good time to remind everybody, like, that's the mission of the Alliance, is to help strengthen the capacity of our nonprofit to be able to do more, to be more sustainable, to be more successful. We had a planning meeting this morning where we're looking at our programming for the first part of next year. And as we design our programs, we're thinking about what are these issues, what are these challenges that we can design our programs around to help strengthen those small to mid-sized to large nonprofits. I think sometimes a part of me is like, oh, we're trying to build their capacity, but they're trying to fundraise, and then we're asking them to pay for our programs, and it can get a little bit. I don't know, I feel like my moral compass sometimes gets out of whack a little bit whenever we're talking about that. But all that to say, that's why we exist, is to be here to support and strengthen our sector in the state, but also to identify what some of these issues and challenges are so that we can find solutions for them. And what makes us unique is that we do have philanthropy on our side. Most states still operate as two separate organizations. So you have the nonprofit provider, you have the funding provider, but we're one unified organization. And so these are conversations that we can go back and have with our funders and our foundations at the state level, at the national level, and being a part of United Philanthropy Forum. Like, I made some notes. Here's some people that I need to go talk to and just find out from funders, why do you do that?
Yeah, I would love to know what they'd say about that.
Specifically, what funder is that won't give
Oh
you?
gosh, I'm not going to call names in this
But, you
forum,
know,
but
like,
there's a lot.
Yeah,
A
but
lot.
like the Dolly Parton, you know, her foundation, she's just going to give books.
Right.
And
Well,
but that's complementing
and
what the
that's-
schools are doing.
There are a lot of
And they should give
funders
money
like
for
that,
Yeah.
but I'm not talking about those.
Yeah.
I'm talking about ones that want, we're all about like early childhood education, but they don't have a narrow focus. They really want to give to early childhood education. I'm just using that as an example. But we're only going to pay for certain things, tangible things, not anything related to salaries, which just shoots you in the foot if you're trying to actually have a early childhood program. But one thing I would say that you guys have the ability to do that most small nonprofits in Mississippi don't, is that there's really only, there are hundreds of foundations in the state, but really only a handful that have a lot of resources. And so there's a lot outside the state of Mississippi, but they don't want to talk to a small nonprofit in Mississippi by and large. They want to talk to a bigger entity like yourself who could maybe help them be introduced to 4 or 5 that are doing housing in Mississippi or any number of topics. So what I would say is if you can help bring some of those outside of the state of Mississippi to the table that are interested in the work that's being done in places like the Delta that are in such great need, and they want to be involved in the work, but they don't know all of us on a personal level, and they wouldn't necessarily want to form a relationship with a small Christian nonprofit, but they might form a relationship with you and then work with 2 or 3 in the state that are doing that work. That's where I see a huge thing that you could do, is open those doors.
Yeah. Just to give a little context, in Mississippi, we have, I think it's like 1.5 billion maybe in philanthropic assets. Sammy, our former executive director, always says that's like petty cash for the Ford Foundation.
Right.
So the payout of that is only like 3 to 4%. And that's in-state philanthropic money. That's family foundations, corporate foundations, I don't know.
How much was that again?
1.5 billion. So we just don't have a lot of assets to go around. So that's why so many people are dependent on those bigger national funders, because they have the money. One has more than we have in the whole state. And so, but to your point, Dina, they're not located here. They're not place-based. Well, Kellogg is like the only place-based funder that we have in Mississippi, meaning that they focus on funding priorities in very specific areas. And we're trying to be better about being the voice for our nonprofits to our funders, whether it's our family foundations, our corporate, those national funders, so that we can best know what the needs are and the opportunities as they identify some priorities and places that they want to invest, and we can help bridge that connection and hopefully see more investment coming in. And even federal dollars too. I know that there was 3 applications for that NTIA money in Mississippi. That's billions of dollars that's going to be invested in the next 3 to 5 years. And I hope that we get a good portion of that in Mississippi. And that's something
Who are
to
the other 2?
I'm not comfortable sharing that in this forum. I'll tell you later.
Okay. I know one of the other two. I just didn't know about the third one.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of federal money, but it's passed through our state agencies. There's not a lot of like just direct federal money unless it's through DRA, which is the Delta Regional Authority, or the Appalachian Regional Commission. It's NTIA funding. There's other Department of not justice, environmental, I don't know, something. Like there's not a lot of just direct federal funding either. It has to pass through a state agency, and that's where it gets caught up a lot and not paid for salaries.
And that's because of the block grants.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the states wanted the block grants in the 80s. It used to be direct, but now I understand why the governors want that, but then they didn't. And they created their own little bureaucracies. And my position is I'd rather know a nameless bureaucrat in DC than one next door to me. But but also philanthropy, and I was a Kellogg fellow, so I'm familiar with it. Philanthropy is, and they understand that even though they have Ford, Kellogg is the 5th largest, Gates is the largest, they know that they don't have enough money with their resources. It's just a drop in the bucket, that it's going to come through the federal government and I'm not advocating that as well, but they understand that they have to influence the federal government. So that's where Kellogg only has $5 billion, so, and you're right. But I think the problem with nonprofits, some of them, everybody doesn't need to be a nonprofit. It's too easy to become a nonprofit.
Well, that's true.
I mean,
We were talking about that this morning.
I mean, you get your 501c3 letter to the IRS, and there's no accountability. There are too many. It's the fact she said it's the 3rd largest sector, on paper, but in actuality, in salaries, because there are too many. And so I think that philanthropy, one of the things that philanthropy, and I've advocated, you got to insist on collaboration in your own community.
Right.
Because there's just not going to be any more money. The pie isn't going to get any bigger. So how do you promote collaboration for results and outcomes? I would love to collaborate with people, because I'm not going to collaborate with you unless you spend resources and not have any outcomes in my community. And you do that accountability has to be on the local level. People in their communities know who is impactful. And why aren't they investing in the nonprofits in their communities if you're impactful? Right? And we don't want to have that conversation. We want to pat ourselves on the back. And there's also, when they talk about, you brought up the food pantry, I can give you so many stories on that there's no collaboration. So you have these people going from one place to the other, and those that are really in need, when they find out about it, the vultures have gotten it and there's nothing left. Because you just sign, just check off, I can get on the soapbox because I've seen it, firsthand. I just don't participate in it. I give specifically to, and I'm going to give it for a scholarship, and I want 100% of my money to go to a scholarship.
Now, I think that line of thinking is one of the reasons why we're in the situation we are with nonprofits. No, not throwing any shade. It's just, I feel that based on the state of the United States as it is, we demonize individuals that we break their legs and ask them to walk. And I think nonprofits are faltering in this situation. I don't want to say failing, faltering is because they're having to take over too much from what the government should have been doing decades ago. And you can't ask them to do that. The nonprofits are not designed to do what the government's supposed to.
And the government is not designed to do that either. I think that's the real issue, in my opinion. And we can have an opinion here. That's not the role of government.
The role of the government is not to provide for its citizens?
No, it's not.
Oh, wow. This
I
is shocking
mean,
to me.
yeah.
I think that's a genuine bipartisan difference.
Yeah,
in the bill.
it is, but I think it's been expanded to do and be everything to everybody, and it just can't be. They talk about, and on the local level, just, they're to provide fire, public safety, and pick up my garbage, and now they're having their own charitable arm too. That's not the role of local government.
If I could interject here, we just had the breakdown of Jackson's water in a whole infrastructure. That is the government.
Thank you.
I agree, and they're not,
And if
that's
you allow
right,
me
I
to
would agree
finish.
with you, and that's
Allow me
one
to
of their
finish.
roles.
If you allow me to finish.
Okay.
And it was on the nonprofits in our city to deliver water to those who couldn't get the water. And they were struggling to get past the grocery stores locally that were sold out to, as you say, vultures, that overcompensated the water and bought barrels of water at a time and trying to insource water into the city. So it has to be a medium that we find where all roads lead to Rome, or it takes more than one to just raise a child. So I think I agree with you is that it is part of the government, and that is why some Jacksonians are frustrated because I paid this water bill, I did my part, and now you're saying I still got to go find some water too, and more than why I paid this light bill, and you still don't give me my water bill next month. So that is, I think with the constituents that we serve, we're putting them, as you said, we know their legs are broken and ask them, well, put on your bootstraps and get up and make it happen. And they're just like, well, baby, I haven't got but one boot left. And I want to reserve this one. And I think we have to also understand that there is a power of empathy that sometimes we just have to have in the nonprofit world. And we have to hold on to that little mustard seed and don't lose it. Tip my TED talk.
I want to circle us back before we wrap up because we're almost at time, and I want to honor everybody's time. On the agenda, you'll see that the last part was brainstorming session. I think we've done that. I think we all shared, thoughts and ideas and suggestions and recommendations. So what we want to see happen next is what we've heard today, what we know, like here's a real issue, here's a real opportunity. Then we want to put some strategy around that, whether it's each of you being a part of that next conversation or other people. It's great that we have this information, but what are we going to do with it? Mm-hmm. It's great to know that we have a nonprofit workforce shortage. What are we going to do about it? So that's what our goal is take this data, take this information, take what we're hearing from people and figure out what to do with it. So give us a little bit of time to kind of brainstorm around how we brainstormed. And I've got some ideas already circulating. And we'll kind of share some recommendations for here's what we think we could move forward with next. And that's where we'll build these smaller working groups or coalitions around the very specific issues. So it's not just you came today, you heard the information, we're done. Right. You can do that if you want to. If you don't want to be a part of anything, we're not going to force you. But the goal is, okay, we got to put some action behind what we know. And so that's what's next. And as y'all start doing some more reports and finding out some more information, want to keep partnering with y'all. So as the data keeps coming, as the information keeps coming, then it helps inform us as we drive the work forward as well. So if anybody wants to stay, that's fine. But I want everybody, it's 3:01. So if anybody needs to go or, has any last questions, I don't know, Jessica, if you need to leave or cut out, if you are able to say if anybody has any more questions, but officially we're kind of done, but unofficially y'all are welcome to stay and keep talking.
I've got a quick question. How do nonprofits kind of work with major corporations? And can you go directly to a major corporation and try to get funding?
Yes. If you know somebody.
Okay, okay, for instance, Amazon, AWS comes to Jackson, Mississippi. They spent $10.7 billion in Jackson, Mississippi to build these 2 data centers. Do nonprofits reach out to AWS? AWS is worried about employees. They're trying to recruit people from New York City and California to come here to work in a cloud computing data center because they're saying that Mississippi doesn't have the academic expertise. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a problem that AWS is having right now. Who's gonna work in this data center? They don't have educated. They've gone to all these different universities and tried to get you guys in us in Mississippi to be AWS certified. They have money that they want to put out for those things. Can nonprofits evolve and say, hey, I see an opportunity here to go to AWS and say, hey, maybe we can come in and make some artificial intelligence guys bringing in a cloud computing, or can you guys fund us? Now, a lot of that money went to possibly a company called Accelerate Mississippi, or it went through the legislature and the lobbyists. When I was in those meetings, I saw legislators and lobbyists coming into those sessions. Where is that money going? I didn't see very many nonprofits. I talk to people all over the state right now, and they don't really. Do you know how much money $10.7 billion is? It's the 4th largest expenditure, capital expenditure in the entire history of the state of Mississippi. The number 1, 4 times anything else. Somebody needs to be knocking on AWS's door saying, hey, you're coming in here, provide. There's going to be a whole ecosystem developed around these 2 data centers coming in here. Nonprofits should be getting some of that money. Nonprofits should be at the state level, getting together, trying to say, we need some of these funds. $10.7 billion, and I could walk around Mississippi all day long and no one knows who AWS is. They think they just sending in, stuff from Amazon that's coming to their house. AWS is a cloud computing company. The only reason they came to Mississippi because they fell into their availability zones. They've got data centers literally all over the world. So if California goes down and for an earthquake, Netflix is on there spending $100 million a day. They ship all that data into the cloud right here in Jackson, Mississippi. So is there a way to get some of that funding, or to reach out to those people, or to reach out to the legislators? Because $10.7 billion, somebody is profiting here somewhere.
Okay, let me say this first, and this may be what you were gonna say too. Accelerate it's a state agency.
Right.
It's the Office of Workforce Development through the state of Mississippi. So workforce money is going to Accelerate, and then it's kind of like that pass through. So that funding is coming through Accelerate, and then they're passing that money out. So wanted to just make sure you understood that.
No, but we work with them. But I was gonna say, we, Holmes Community College is having it's a 4-week training to do AWS training. And so I'm with the Office of Adult Ed. We work with individuals. I'm at the Community College Board, and we work with individuals that have dropped out of high school. What I did personally when I saw that AWS was providing training, I contacted AWS and said, how do the people that we serve in adult education get into your training? Because you're starting off at $22 an hour. It's a 4-week training. And at the minute that they finish on that Friday, they have employers there ready to hire them. And so they're getting stackable credentials with that. So what we did is we just were proactive and reached out, not really saying, hey, how can we get any money? But how can the people that we serve, we know they have a skill set that have a high school diploma, because that's all you need to get into that training is a high school diploma. How can we connect our students to this training?
Right.
And so we didn't necessarily ask for the money. We were like, how can we serve you? And then the people that we provide a service to in our communities.
And to that point,
With Accelerate, they have a staff person that is
Yeah.
dedicated to AWS. So I can make a connection to you, and I can't think of her name right now. What's her
Is
name?
it Leanne or is it Shalika?
That's what we-
No.
but to the point, why should they AWS, Amazon Web Services? Because I just feel them, you're throwing out AWS and AWS. What is that? Amazon Web Services. That's all it is. But to a nonprofit, why should they give me some money when I haven't proven I can do anything with training or placing people? And to your point, what a nonprofit, what I like to do is get people that need jobs into those jobs. Because that's what I should be doing anyway. So, but they should give me 50 grand to do that, right? That doesn't even make sense to me. So I think to your point, you reach out to them, what are the skill sets that you're looking for? And we try to get people those skill sets and connect them to those jobs. That's how we improve our communities.
And those, can those collaborations like with Holmes, what is your university?
It's
Holmes Community
Holmes Community College.
Now, they're not providing it, Amazon's providing the training, they're just using Holmes' location.
Because you would,
And they're taking 20 every time.
yeah, and that's a benefit to your community, right? Those are people in your community that you're already serving. So if they were not providing that opportunity, where could you put 20 people through a program in 4 weeks and that's going to lead to a higher paying job? It's not going to happen. But it's, so when I look at nonprofit work, for me personally, I'm getting paid. I want to be successful. I'm going to be successful by the people I get to employment. And that's the way you got to collaborate with people. Don't give me, because you can't do everything. That's one of the things nonprofits think. I'm a nonprofit and I care about people, therefore you should fund me. That's no reason to fund you. If you don't have a record of success, you wouldn't go to a mechanic that's never worked on a car. And so I just think this whole notion of nonprofit, I believe in it, but it has gotten skewed to.
Well, and I think there needs to be a better relationship with nonprofits with, like, say, what we do in adult intervention with our adult education programs. Like, I don't know if y'all know about the services that we have at our community colleges. Working with students that have dropped out of high school, and ACT prep that we offer, and work keys testing that we offer, and putting on transitioning them and things like that. You may not know about apprenticeship opportunities,
Right.
Things like that. So I'm sitting here thinking, I wrote myself a note, we need to have a better relationship from an adult ed local program relationship with you guys in the community.
That's right.
When I was in
That's
Holmes,
exactly
I'm from
right.
Holmes County. I used to go to
That's right.
Central Mississippi Incorporated,
That's right.
and do presentations about going to college.
That's right.
And
That's right.
FAFSA and things like that. And I don't know if we do that anymore.
That's right. So, and that's where I think the disconnection is, the programs are there and out here. In fact, I think I left Quinn voicemail. I was on a call last week with a lady out in Wyoming. Well, I was on a call week before that on something. Like I told Forrest, I know what all the problems are. I don't want any solutions, because people don't want to hear about, what they need to do. They want to do what they want to do. I was on a phone call with a national group, and she said Mississippi has it figured out on something. And she showed this presentation. I said, Mississippi? I'm from Mississippi. I don't know. I think I'm pretty informed. And I circled back with her, and she gave me his number. So I left him a voicemail message today. That's a case in point.
Yeah, okay, I got one last question to ask. Okay, here it is. Like with this young lady right here, with Holmes Community College, is there a way for her to say, hey, if I run a food pantry and I meet kids who are dropping out, can we develop a grant where I send some of these kids from the food pantry, we do a little education, send them to home so they can get into this AWS program, and we collaborate. That way her program can say, hey, my reach is far. I'm in every food kitchen. We got kids coming from here, here, and here together, because a lot of these funders are looking to see, hey, what is your reach out there? We want to fund, and then they're looking for outcome-based measures. How successful are you? That's the kind of thing. I think that collaboration is a key word. Collaboration and community, I believe, is what can get nonprofits over the top. Because right now, if you're looking for funding out here in the United States of America, tech is where there's funding at right now. Down the Gulf Coast, we're looking at artificial intelligence, cloud computing, cybersecurity, data science, developing schools like her. I teach AWS, cloud practitioner. I'm teaching a class in A+. If you teach a student at Holmes through a company called CompTIA, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of CompTIA, but they've got an A+ class there a networking class and a cybersecurity class, you get those kind of things going. You putting kids on changing trajectory at that point in time. We could become Huntsville. Huntsville is not having any problem getting monies right now.
But yeah.
Zero problems.
Yes. We got to start where we are, but I think collaboration is the key. And to your point, and everybody wins. If you're working with a group of people that need jobs and training, no one is going to give you the money to do that, but I can get you the kid and I can get them there through my funding. You get them the training, they get the job. It's a win-win. Well, actually, it's a trifecta. You win, I win, and the kid wins.
And let me say, another purpose of us leading these meetings is to connect people.
Mm-hmm.
So y'all know each other now, right?
Connect. And can I also just say, as a South Jacksonian, living near the problem, I would like to see programs like that advertised, because as I pass the billboards in my community, nobody outmarkets the military. Nobody outmarkets the health issues.
Now, Heinz markets pretty well.
I don't see that over there. But I'm just telling you what I see
I'll
out
have
there
that
this
11
afternoon.
day.
Nobody
But
outmarkets
on
beer
that end,
and
so we apply for one.
cigarettes. And so I just
The
think those
Association of
billboards
Community
should be very
Activities. We apply
affordable
for
and sometimes are
anti-tobacco.
outaged. And I would like to see that billboard.
Yeah, in fact, I got they reviewed it already. And
Now, I'm at the community college.
Wherever.
So we
I just think
But
you're
they were
locally
gonna
medicine,
work
or are they all?
Right now, they're planning on, right now,
I got
it's like it's in
700
the Madison County area, but I think it's
What?
gonna be statewide.
Some opened up.
Because you're
50,
looking at
60
supply,
million.
they're needing construction,
So,
electrical.
yeah, so it's
something. You know
competitive.
probably more about it than I do, because she's at
Yeah,
MDES.
but
I just happened to see the advertisement on Facebook and reached out to AWS, and I watched their recording and reached out to them, tried to find out how to get students lined up. So I got the adult ed director teamed up with them.
Yeah, but as soon as you put it on a billboard that you can help find somebody that pays $22 an hour, you're gonna start getting those numbers. Because unfortunately, the demographic, the lack of financial responds to no. Our finances are escalating. It's easier to tell me I can afford it for $10 a week, right?
Yeah.
So if you put that language in there, you'll start getting those.
Well, maybe we can partner, because we're all across the state, affiliate to every community college, in the state, as well as 3 K-12 systems. I mean, we're even in
So
partnership.
you don't actually work from home, but you could.
No, I work for the community college board, but I work with, adult ed. So like, I was just on a call with the Mississippi Delta Community College person this morning. Hey, here's my, I have electric, so listen to me. Digital, a digital card.
But you're trying to take a picture.
And I can connect y'all to every one of our adult ed directors. When you got my information.
I know. I was just thinking, people in Mississippi sometimes we're guilty of operating in a silo, but what I quickly learned that if we can get people pointed to adult ed and workforce development, CTE, we can break the systemic problem of dependency and other issues, and we've got the resources to do it.
Are you sure you're not looking? If y'all give me yours, then I can email you. I do that to the office. It may not be working. I know. So quick. Oh, yeah.
We tried to get some.
You gonna try?
Yeah.
If you're tech savvy. Yeah. Okay, there's a little box popping out here.
I'm gonna reach out to her today. I'm gonna pop up. No, but my house got flooded, Jackson. And so, and then she started an opportunity.
There it goes.
I was gonna just like.
And then you'll just have me.
Yes.
Where are y'all from?
I lost 40
Okay.
pounds. Rebecca still works.
There you go.
I'm sorry to listen to when y'all first.
But I've got yours in case it doesn't work. Oh, fantastic.
It was about 2 years ago.
Yes.
We started second season, and then my house.
Yeah.
but yeah, there's no jobs.
Yeah, I was gonna
Well,
actually
and
reach out to her.
Michael was telling me a little bit about it after the.
And if they're willing to spend the one thing that we're needing, and she's, our state director is literally going around the state talking to different people. We met with Forrest and Rebecca 2 weeks ago about, HSC testing, hospital equivalency testing, and then also offering hospital equivalency classes.
I'm so glad. Did it help you?
And so we are limited to like nonprofit card. We can't pay for HSC testing, even though, and we can't pay for the concerns. So even though hospital equivalency testing has been placed in responsibility, we don't have to be.
Do you have a pretty good success rate?
Oh, we do.
Okay, so, you know, then I'll connect you with some people that may have the funding that can pay for that.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about with collaboration. You're not gonna get all the money to do everything, but someone
Right.
is always competing for the money.
Yeah, that's
right.
But if we can connect, what I do well, what you do well, it's gonna be an outcome, successful outcome for each of us. And for the concerned.
I'm so glad you
Well, and that's what I would like.
What is the Association of Community Action Agencies?
Yeah, what I would like to see is more,
But where's that Madison, okay.
we have over 311,000 people above the age of 18 that are, you know, and I know they're being served. A lot of them are being served through the nonprofits.
Yeah.
What's that?
We have over 311,000 people in our state
Oh, yeah.
without a hospital diploma. 18 or older, and I know they are seeking services
Just down
Yeah.
the
through the nonprofits throughout the state, and I think that we have a good relationship with y'all. And I can say, hey, if you send your student or you have someone who doesn't have a hospital diploma,
Yeah,
or you send them to build ed programs, we can report to you. And
That's right. Let me get your card. I know.
Hey, do you have yours? No, I'm at.
Yeah.
But,
I don't have a card. Do you have your phone?
yeah, I do have your QR.
I'm cute up for her.
Yeah, but that's a good way to do it.
I'm like, don't worry about it. I just cut y'all some, you know.
Okay, that's really the way to do it. So you just put your card and you just create a QR code.
I did through Blink.
Blink,
I
okay.
did. It's free.
Okay, yeah, that's really the way to go. And then you don't have to have a card.
I impressed my boss because, you know, I'm not real tech savvy. I do know what CompTIA is, or CompTIA, and CompPlus.
Okay.
He does that, yeah. I mean, I don't, yeah, I only know, I heard of it. I don't know what it
Blink
is.
is Blink, so I need to know Blink.
That's what mine is. But you can do it on any, there's several platforms. Oh, the Blink?
Okay,
That's what I learned.
okay.
And then you just add me. And then I think it'll come back to me.
Uh-huh.
I like you.
It's done.
Good deal.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that, because that's really the way to go, you don't need this and starts.
Yes.
I don't know, it's very fulfilling what I do.
She's an apprentice.
Michael told me all that.
Yeah.
I love the content.
Oh, thank you.
I love it.